True peak performance is about showing up in your peak state no matter what you're doing and who you're with. Which means showing up as your best self in your business, showing up as your best self at home with your family, when you're helping your kids with their homework, when you're dealing with the barista at the coffee and he gives you your drink and it's the wrong type of milk, right? It's the ability to be your best self, to operate from your peak state, which is an elevated version of you in every single domain. And it will look a little bit differently depending on the domain. But that comes down to asking yourself the question, how can I be better today? How can I be a little bit more patient with my kids? How can I be a little bit more committed to this task? How can I be a little bit more understanding to this really challenging team member that is grinding my gears? That is peak performance. Showing up in your peak state, always looking to improve yourself in your relationships, in your work, in everything.
Shadi, it's
Pleasure to be here.
To finally meet you.
Likewise.
We had a quick conversation about me seeing one of your very early motivational videos when you were, 17?
No.
18?
Oh, you flatter me. If it was 10 years ago, I would have been about 27?
So 17.
17.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. Some age, yeah. Yeah.
All right. So my first question is, what is the biggest performance enhancer that's within our control?
Oh, you're starting with the big ones. The greatest performance enhancer, if I look at the research, not based on my perspective, is actually something that all of us have access to. It is something that the likes of the world's best athletes use, the likes of the world's greatest minds use, and it's been shown to be more powerful than caffeine for a performance boost in the moment. Any guesses?
Sleep.
Sleep, exactly. And it's funny because when you speak to high performers, one of the first thing that often goes when things are busy is sleep. That's fine, I'll just stay up later tonight or wake up early tomorrow, and they don't realize that they're missing out on capitalizing on this incredible performance enhancing natural drug, if you like, that you get from just getting that quality sleep.
All right, now that we know that, the first thing that faces us at night is something called
social media? Phone?
Yes, which
overthinking?
is by revenge, bedtime procrastination.
Oh, good segue, very nice.
So tell us about the revenge bedtime procrastination.
Okay, well, I'm so glad you asked. So, what studies have found is that when people feel like they don't have a lot of control over their daytime life, so they are in high pressure jobs, they're entrepreneurs with a lot on their minds, or even they just have a lot of family responsibilities, whatever it is, you don't have a lot of control, right before bed, they like to regain a sense of control by taking time for themselves, which looks like them lying in bed, procrastinating from sleeping, and scrolling on their devices. And it's a mindless consumption form, but it's addictive. And sometimes I get stuck in this habit as well, where you're literally just avoiding sleeping because you like the freedom that you get. You're making this choice, but it's completely detrimental because also we know that when we're looking at our devices, when our brains are going, we're not going to have the best quality sleep.
I mean, it's like a dichotomy. Like, one side, you're like, if I don't have some me time, right, I will burn out, right? So we will, be either on Netflix going longer than we are supposed to.
Yeah. One more episode.
Oh, no, lately I never go through a full episode. Because I'm like, all right, I have 20 minutes and I'll go to sleep.
That's good. Good
right?
discipline.
But and then maybe I go until I finish, then that's more than, or you start scrolling, as you said, and next thing you know, from 10, it went to 50 and if you're very particular about that every micro counts, it does make a difference. And just knowing or being aware about it, because preparing for a conversation today, I went through the revenge bedtime. I went, what is revenge bedtime procrastination? And so, and you spoke about it. And so last night, I was like, oh no, I'm not gonna fall for it.
Yeah.
And I wanted.
Yeah.
I didn't do anything.
Good. Okay.
I just went straight to bed.
Good.
And I felt like, okay, I'm missing out.
Oh,
I'm missing out,
interesting.
right? Because usually I would want to even 10 minutes just to sit and watch something, and then I didn't. And I thought that in the morning I'll feel,
better. You'd feel amazing because you.
No. I thought I'd feel bad that I missed out on that, right?
Okay.
Not at all. Not at all. I felt that I got better sleep, and everything that comes with better sleep, like your mood is already better.
So much better.
You have more mental clarity.
Psychological vitality is the term that they throw around in the research world. And so the idea is, if you think about vitality, it's that feeling of life. I have life. And it's so interesting that you said you didn't do it before bed, and there was this maybe a slight feeling of, oh no, I'm missing out from having that time. Especially if you're used to it, you feel that FOMO, fear of missing out. But the benefit comes the next day when you think, wow, I actually slept really well and I have more energy. And side note though, so what's also really interesting, if you're someone who feels like you need some break between life and bed, some studies have been done that have found that if you can, for example, scroll or be on Netflix and do it mindfully, so you are mindfully consuming. The worry is when it becomes mindless. Swipe, swipe, swipe. You're not even consuming anything. It's just like an automatic scroll. And if we think about how these platforms are designed, they are designed to keep us scrolling, using the thumb. Like even that movement is almost like a dopamine reward in itself.
It's all been calculated.
Completely, which is scary. It's like we are at the whim of these expertly designed platforms to keep us doing the things that we don't want to be doing. Anyway, side note, but if you can be really mindful about it, like say, I'm going to look at 5 videos or I'm going to watch for 10 minutes, you're still able to have that sense of autonomy. I am choosing to do this for me, while knowing there is a cutoff time, being very mindful, and then you don't end up doing it for 3 hours and think, oh my goodness, where did that time go? So that's one way, but I love what you said, that you just acknowledge, okay, I am not going to do it tonight, and then use it as like a social experiment, see how I feel tomorrow, little study on myself, and you notice the difference.
And now that you've had your good sleep, right, to make sure that you guard your willpower, right, because you have a mental capacity for making decisions. Once you're out of that or you're low on that, you face mental fatigue, which then results in you losing your willpower. So the question that presents itself is, how do you guard your willpower?
Yes, willpower. I'm so glad you brought it up. So every decision that we make throughout the day is expending willpower. I like to use the analogy of like we are a glass with water in our glass. And when we wake up in the morning, assuming we've had a decent night's sleep, our cup of willpower is restored. Every decision from what am I having for breakfast, what time am I leaving, what should I play on, in the car on the way to work, these are subtle decisions that we're making that we're not even aware of that is expending a little bit of willpower. Then we have the bigger decisions like work-related, business-related, people-related, you're expending. By the time you get to later in the day, we've expended so much willpower, and this is why big decisions can be really challenging at night and can feel overwhelming and can feel like it's too much. It's because we actually don't have the cognitive power to process it. My advice just to anyone who's experiencing a lot in the day is to save big decision making for the morning. Doesn't have to be first thing in the morning, but sometime in the morning when you've replenished your willpower. When you're staying up late on your devices, what happens is you have less psychological vitality the next day. Your cup doesn't actually replenish as much as it would otherwise. Sure. So you're actually starting the day with less. And then because you have less willpower at the end of the day, you have less ability to resist the swiping, and you do it again, and so it becomes this vicious cycle. But back to your question, what can you do to help restore your willpower or develop your willpower? I like to call them micro challenges, micro willpower challenges. So on the one side, we have our brain's ability to exert power over our actions and to make decisions and be disciplined. And to some extent, that just happens when we're making decisions and, we don't have control over the decision making. However, you can set yourself little challenges to start to develop your willpower muscle, which is different to what's going on in our brain. And that's the ability to resist temptation. Mm-hmm. The ability to resist temptation. One of the most powerful little things that I did is that I used to wake up every night at about 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. It was very, very consistent. I find when I'm on my phone at night or checking emails at night or my brain is activated exposure to blue light, I have no problem sleeping, but I will wake up at 2 or 3 a.m. and my mind is fully awake. Mm. And what is the first thing I do? Reach for my phone, which is terrible. It's the worst thing, but it's what I was doing. And I think a lot of people can resonate with that. And so what I started doing is, okay, I'm going to set myself a micro challenge. When I wake up at 3 a.m., I'm not going to reach for my phone. I know I'm going to have an urge to reach for my phone, a habitual, deep urge, but I'm going to resist it. And it's challenging to resist it. But what you will notice, what I notice, is that you feel the urge bubble up within you. If you consciously resist, you can count down from 5, you can do whatever you need to, you will feel it dissipate. And then it's almost like you literally feel that urge leave your body. And that is one very small way you can start to develop your discipline muscle, which is so important, because when we're talking about willpower and discipline, not the one related to our brain, but the one related to the ability to resist temptation, I think personally discipline is more important than motivation, because motivation is either there or it's not. And if you're relying on motivation to get up and do the thing, you're almost setting yourself up for failure, because there's no guarantee it's going to show up. And also sometimes the motivation comes after you've already started the thing. Yeah. So if you're waiting for it, you're just going to be perpetually waiting.
Which is very connected to do you have confidence and then take action, or take action and then have confidence?
Exactly.
Like, do confident people just...
Are they just confident to begin with?
Yes.
Are they born that way?
Are they born that way?
Yes. So yes, exactly. This idea of confidence, and one of the myths that exists is that I need to wait to feel confident before I'm ready to do this thing. When I'm confident, then I'll start. And also motivation, like when I'm motivated, then I'll start. It's like they're expecting to wake up one morning.
Every average performer.
It said every average performer ever. But that's not how it works. When we look at the research, what actually needs to happen first is an action. When you take the action, what's happening is you start to visualize yourself doing more of that action. You start to see yourself in motion. You start to develop the skill. You start to develop the competence. You start to build what's called your self-efficacy, which is your belief that you can achieve your goals, that you have the tools, the resources, the skills to set a goal and reach it. That then boosts your motivation, which then makes you more likely to take the action. So this whole question of like what comes first, action or confidence, it's the action that needs to come first.
A lot of times, I mean, which is fear of failure, we are crippled by trying to avoid the horrible feeling of, sucking at what you do, and the only way you can ease off that feeling is by taking action, because this is not a fake it till you make it. This is an actual thing happening, is that as you take action, you're increasing your competency.
Yes.
So this is not you
pretending
or fooling yourself.
Yes.
Because you can fool whoever you want, right? But you can't fool yourself.
That was beautiful. That you can fool whoever you want, but you can never fool yourself.
And it will always come in your energy. It's completely different when somebody can fake confidence. I'm not saying they can't, right? But it's not the same as somebody who's genuinely very comfortable.
And you can feel it. You can really feel it when someone is putting it on versus when someone is authentically being themselves. And I remember there's a quote, and I don't know who said it. It was something like, don't fake it till you make it, be it till you become it. And I love that idea, because the idea is you are not pretending to be someone you're not. What you are doing is knowing that there are certain things you could do, certain mindset reframes you can apply, certain ways you can hold your posture that will change how you feel and change how you show up. But it starts with doing those things first.
Which is also connected to, you're saying be it, right? So being it has to do with identity. And that identity is what you decide, right? Because, let's say when it comes to growth mindset, identity, those who have a higher chance of reaching a ceiling in their performance are the ones who connect their identity with how well they perform. So another way, or especially when you're starting something new, right, that you're not comfortable with and you haven't put your reps in it, is putting an identity for yourself as, I'm a great learner. And this is me in action right now. I'm learning, you know? So I have, instead of me focusing on, why am I not feeling comfortable? I'm focusing on learning and action, which is very much connected to ghosting yourself.
Yeah.
And the whole ostrich syndrome.
Yes. So there's so much you just shared. I'm like, where do I start? So, okay, I want to touch on identity first, because what we often hear people saying is things like, and this is not something they would outwardly share, but we pick up on it when we're working with them one-on-one, when we've been working with a group for a while, they start becoming more comfortable and you hear things like, I'm bad at this. I'm such a procrastinator. I am this, I am that. And the words I am are really powerful because anything that comes after it, you are identifying with it. I am bad at this. You're explaining it as if it's like a fixed thing that is who you are. I am a procrastinator. You are claiming it as a part of your identity. And that is really damaging, and we don't realize it because it's essentially a reflection of a growth mindset. And so I love how you just had that little reframe when you're feeling that discomfort. Instead of thinking, I am a failure, I can't do this, it is, I am learning. This discomfort is a sign of learning. This discomfort is a sign of growth. And it's powerful, because otherwise what can happen is a lot of the time we want, and this is part of how our brain is wired, our brain loves certainty and predictability, and it has evolved that way, and it kept our ancestors alive, which is great, thank goodness for that. However, today we don't live in an environment where there is a lot of certainty. We live in an environment where there's a giant fog of uncertainty. We don't know how things will unfold. We don't know what will be successful. We cannot tell the future. And yet our brains have not caught up with that. And so what the brain will do is often fill in a gap. I don't know how this will end. Well, what if I fail? Oh my gosh, I'm going to fail. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to stay safe.
Building all the negative scenarios.
Completely, the worst case scenario. It's called confabulation. The brain will fill in the blank with something to give it a sense of certainty. But naturally, because the brain wants to protect you, so it's just doing its job, but it will often magnify the negative things that could happen, because then it's like, yay, I kept you safe, you're alive, tick to the brain.
Reaffirms that identity.
Completely.
Again. Yeah.
And so a lot of people will, it's called the ostrich bias or the ostrich fallacy, where they will literally, like not literally, but they will figuratively stick their head in the sand so they don't have to deal with discomfort. It's easier if I ignore it. It's easier if I don't try. And the reality is, it's true. It is easier if you ignore it, and it is easier if you don't try in the short term. Yeah,
which you gave a beautiful example in your post when you mentioned, and I fell victim to it.
I was speaking to you.
100%. I will not check the bill. And, because I'm not sure what's going to show up. So, you know what? I'll do something else instead of just checking it and then plan myself accordingly.
Totally. And that's what it is, planning. The fear comes because we don't know. And so we make the worst case scenario. And so there is a technique in the project management world, which anyone who's in that space will be aware of it if you're in projects. It's called inversion. It's also called a pre-mortem. And essentially what it means is you think about something you're worried about, some uncertainty, and you list all the things that could go wrong. Every possible thing. So you don't ignore it, because we know sometimes that ignoring or trying to avoid a particular thought only gives it more intensity, and it comes back
absolutely
more, stronger, and it amplifies it. But if you write it all down, all the things that I'm worried about, and then you say, okay, if this happens, what am I going to do? What's my next step? And what that does is it takes the sting out of it, because you're reminding yourself that you have autonomy. You can make a choice. It also makes you very aware of the real risks. Let's say there is a real risk that you put all your money into this venture and it fails and you have a family to feed. It's going to get you to think twice about that. Maybe now is not the right time, which is actually a very wise decision to make.
Absolutely.
So it's a great way to do a realistic risk assessment. We need to acknowledge that when there are risks in anything, business, personal, but we also need to make sure that we're fact checking that to make sure we're not completely allowing the risk part of our brain to go wild, and then thinking, okay, even if bad things happen, what am I going to do? And you realize it's not going to be the end of the world, and you've prepared for it. So if it happens, you have a plan of action.
I feel it's also something to remind ourselves that the cost we're paying by avoiding is just going to increase stress in our lives. So we have to always link it that, all right, I want to check this, or I want to do that now. I'm doing that because I want my stress to go up, because it will. And this made sense when I heard it from one of the interviews with Jeff Bezos, and he says that stress has a strong correlation with us avoiding what we know we're supposed to be doing. And as soon as we take the smallest action towards it, 70% dissipates.
Amazing.
And I, at least with me, I definitely feel that way. As soon as I take, because the whole, which is amazing thing, how we're built as humans, that as soon as we know we're supposed to be doing something and we're not, that we feel anxious. So it keeps us doing well, giving us a nudge, like
keeping us on the right path.
Yeah, keeping us on the right path. All right, so we spoke about, I'm trying to put this all together in a way to have the best productive day, right? So we got the sleep right, we avoid the phone maybe before sleeping, woke up, we're aware about, guiding our willpower, guarding our willpower, and I feel connected to that is also why is it productivity lies in the power of saying no?
Oh, I love this. There's two things I want to share here. One of them is filling in a gap from actually before, and then the other one relates to this, the power that comes from saying no to the wrong things so that you have more space to say yes to what's right. I'm going to touch on the first one. The first one related to what we were talking about in terms of doing the right thing when the right thing is hard, or the stress that comes when we're not doing what we should be doing. Something that a lot of us get stuck into is language that reflects being obligated or being forced to do something. Language of I have to and I should. Oh, I have to go to the gym this morning. I really should call my mother. I have to stay late. This is not empowering language, because it makes it feel like someone else is holding us to that. And it strips us of our autonomy. A simple shift is to change it to choose to. I choose to stay late. I choose to call my mother. And I remember I once shared this in a keynote, and someone from the audience, he was a bit of a heckler, sometimes we get them, we were talking about work and waking up early, and I have to go to work. And he said, but I was using the example of changing have to choose to work. And he said, but I really don't choose to go to work, like I have to go. And I said, okay, let's workshop this out a little bit. What would happen if you didn't go to work tomorrow? And he said, I'd probably get an email from my boss wondering where I am. And I said, okay, what happens if you then didn't go the next day? And he said, I'd probably raise a few red flags. And I said, what if you didn't go for a week? He said, I'd probably lose my job. I said, okay, now is your job important to you? And he said, well, I'm not sure. And I said, no, really think about it. Is your job and everything that comes with it, getting a salary, having financial security, is that important to you? And he said, yes, actually it is. I said, okay, great. So when you don't go to work, if you choose not to go to work, you're going to lose that thing that's important to you. And he's like, yeah, actually that's right. And I said, okay, so you are choosing to go to work because it gives you something that is important to you. And he had this little aha moment where he realized that he was making it so much more difficult for himself because he was feeling like he had to go to work. But actually, It was a choice he was making every day.
No one's putting a gun
He can
to
always
your
choose
head.
not to go. Exactly. You can always choose not to do something. And I think that's such a powerful reframe. The moment I changed, and I still catch myself out sometimes, I've got to go to, I choose to go to the gym. I choose to go to the gym. I want to, whatever it is for you. This is called cognitive reframing or relabeling. And it is absolutely powerful. A side note on the topic of relabeling, there was a study from Harvard. Alison Woodbrooks is a researcher, and she wanted to understand whether you could literally rename one emotion to another. Could you relabel one emotion to another? Specifically, can you rename anxiety as excitement? Because if you think about the raw nature of this emotion outside of the subjective, like what you're doing, the raw experience, physiological experience, is very similar. It's an increase in intensity, increase in heart rate, increase in bodily heat. You know, you might feel something in your gut.
Yes.
And so she designed an experiment where she had a series of people. One group was doing anxiety-inducing things like a maths exam, presenting to an audience without any time to prepare. And the other group was not doing anything. The other group was... There were two groups that were doing the same thing. One group was told to out loud say, I'm excited, rather than I'm anxious. And the other group wasn't told anything. She found that the group that was told to say out loud, I am excited, ended up being less anxious and performed better.
Wow.
Just from what they told themselves about how to interpret their emotions. And so that is it's evidence of the power of our thinking and how our thinking can actually control our bodily experience.
Where you
and then how we
direct your
perform.
thoughts, yeah.
It's fascinating. So I think that's really important as a takeaway. But then going to the other piece that you mentioned.
The power of saying no.
Powers, thank you for reminding me. I was like, what was that other thing? Power of saying no. When someone is wanting to improve their life, be better, do more, improve themselves, one of two things can happen. There is this self-optimization focus. I must do everything and learn everything and expand as much as possible and say yes to every opportunity because I don't want to miss out. And this is my time. The other thing that can happen is, this is more related to a personality trait. If you're also a people pleaser and you tend to just say yes to everyone else because you want to make them happy and you want them to like you and you want to be validated and that makes you feel good. And so you say yes. But what can happen in both of those instances is that you have said yes to so many other things and people that you have said no to yourself. You don't have time. You're doing things you deep down don't want to do. Might be misaligned with your values. Might be prioritizing everyone else's needs and not your own. And that is dangerous in the long term. So in both cases, what is so powerful is to actually tap into the power of saying strategic no's. And I call them strategic because sometimes when we view them as I'm saying no, it can feel a bit selfish.
Right.
Or it can be, oh no, but I'm genuinely going to miss out on something. So you view it as strategic, meaning there is a greater purpose to it, to reach a final objective. Right. And the next question is, well, how do you know what to say no to? Like, how do you know what? And so I like to have a criteria in mind. This is something we usually share with our students. Pick 3 things that are important to you to use as a criteria point when you're saying yes to something. So let's say you're I'll give you an example. If you're an aspiring speaker, and all of a sudden you're saying yes to every single opportunity and you have no time and you're exhausted. So those 3 points for you, one of them is going to be, okay, I want to say yes to things that are in these areas and supporting these values. The second one is I'm going to say yes to things that are within the hours of 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. because I want my evenings. The third one is I'm going to say yes to things that actually pay me. You know, sometimes you're accepting a lot of, which is fine, and that's a whole other discussion we could have. But you know, they're my objective criteria. An opportunity comes, rather than compulsively saying yes because you don't want to miss out. You run it through your criteria. Is this aligned with my values and my goals? Is this within the time frame that I said I was okay to do? And am I getting paid? And if it meets those 3 criteria, fantastic. Go and say yes. If it doesn't, there's another step. Is this going to help me get closer to my end goal? And if it's not, you need to have the courage to politely decline. Now, if you're someone who is more of just that agreeable people pleaser, you might naturally...
If you're on that side of the spectrum. Because I think we're all in spectrums.
Exactly. Right. So if you have more of a tendency to lean towards wanting other people to be happy and you identify, or rather your identity is linked to being liked, that can be really challenging. Because the moment especially if you're someone who has done it for a long time, people expect you to always say yes. And so the moment you say no, it is very nerve-wracking and anxiety-inducing because you don't know what they're going to say, what they're going to think.
And you're not comfortable.
Exactly. So 2 things I want to share. The first one is there was a study that was done, I think it was it was after 2010. It was actually in a computer science space. But what they were looking at is that when we're under pressure, even taking an extra split second, an intentional delay in making a decision leads to a better decision as opposed to on the spot. And so when you're someone who likes to say yes, you'll often just immediately say yes, sure, without even thinking it. And then you're like, oh, I didn't really want to accept to do this. So you can take just a slight delay, which can sound like, thanks for the opportunity, let me check my calendar and get back to you.
Okay.
Can you send me an email with the details and I will check?
Yes.
Or I would love to, I just need to see if I have any other scheduled plans.
Rather than giving a blank.
Yeah, exactly. Or even rather than no. Because that's, sometimes you don't want to just straight out say no. That's really daunting.
Yes.
So you give yourself an intentional delay, but then you need to get back to that person
right.
in a timely manner. You can't just leave them hanging because they might need to go to someone else or, but that can be really helpful. Now, the second thing I want to share, Mel Robbins has captured this beautifully in her latest book. It's called The Let Them Theory. Okay. And the idea is that a lot of the time we are driven to do things because of what we think other people will think about us, say about us, judge how they'll judge us. Her mantra is let them. If they're going to be unhappy, let them. If they're going to say things about you behind your back, let them. You don't need to worry about those things. You just need to do what's aligned with your values and know that every yes you say, there was a quote again that I came across. It was like, every no you say to someone else needs to be a yes to you and your values. That's how you know it's the right move.
It has to be a win-win.
Exactly. And then I think that's a beautiful way to help rationalize that and help it make sense in a way that you've got something to do with it,
And it reminded me, talking about spectrums, where are you in that spectrum? There was a phase where I felt, okay, now I need to achieve. I want to achieve more, right?
Choose to achieve.
No, choose to achieve more. And I felt I was on the spectrum of constantly saying no.
Oh.
Because maybe fear of failure, which is very normal, very common. Mm. And I watched a video from Jim Rohn, the giant. And he said that when he was 25 till he was 31, he decided to do 2 things that changed his life, which was 1, get a mentor, 2, say yes to every opportunity, right? And I think that also works when you're on the other side of the spectrum, because automatically you'll be saying no and try and justify it and say no. So I was like, you know what? I'm done with whatever stage I was at that time. And I was like, let's do this. So I started saying yes. And let's say it was a opportunity came for me to get on Dubai TV. And I was very new to the whole content creation, and this was going to be a first interview on air. It'll be live and in Arabic, which I wasn't comfortable with. So, but hey, we already made a decision, Hisham.
I love it. Commitment.
We're going to say yes to every opportunity that comes, regardless of how it will make us feel. And yeah, we had to get to work, but... So I think it's good to have awareness of where do you fall in that spectrum. And also, talking about the power of saying no, when I'm on the other side of being a people's pleaser. So I don't...
You're a people displeaser? And proud?
I'm not proud.
No, I don't. That was a joke. I mean, you know what's important to you and what's aligned with what's important to you, and you honor that. I think that's a really healthy thing.
Yeah.
And if someone needed help, I imagine you would be the kind of person that if you're able to, you would help them.
So, which I feel, from one side, I feel like I am on the other side where not the nicest person, maybe. But then again, all of my close friends are like the nicest people, and I know they consider me one of the most reliable people they have. So I know, as much as I said I'm on the other spectrum of pleasing people, but I know I have a good trait of, showing up whenever is needed. But going back to somebody who's being a people's pleaser, I think it goes down to saying no, even to yourself.
Yes.
So the power of saying no is not just to others, it's also saying no to yourself.
Interesting. Can you give me an example?
Let's say, which is a challenge I faced also. I realized my sleep would, because the sugar reacts with me like in a crazy way, right? Like it gives me a spike immediately, right? So if I have juice at night, my sleep will get affected in a big proportion. So I had to decide to have no juice, and that was a big challenge at the beginning, So now after dinner, I'm just having water, right? And then it became, if I have a lot of water, then
constantly waking up
I'm gonna wake up to go to the toilet, right? And then it had to become like, oh no, but I'm gonna feel like I'm thirsty or whatever. So now it became I only have a sip before I sleep, right? And be like, yeah, but what's gonna happen? No, you'll be fine, But this is my mental dialogue.
Yeah.
You touched on many things that I was planning to bring up, but you already touched on it in two ways, which is when you write down your goals, it helps you with avoiding the FOMO trap.
Mm-hmm.
And also regarding putting it down before saying no and strategic no's, that is linked with gaining clarity on what you want. So first, let's go with how does writing your goals, which I already touched upon, help you with avoiding the FOMO trap?
So not enough people write their goals down. And it's so interesting because people generally know what they want, or at least they say they know what they want. And then you give them a pen and paper and you say, articulate it. And they really struggle because they've never gone through that process of distilling it. What really is it that you are aiming for? So writing it down from a very basic level, simple level, is it forces you to distill what it is that you are aiming for. The other thing is it allows you to see, how am I framing this goal? Am I framing it as something that I'm wanting to move forward towards, or something I'm trying to escape? For example, I want to be fit versus I don't want to be fat. Essentially, similar goal, completely different framing. And while the running away from something can be motivating, it's not sustainable in the long run, because what does it mean to not be fat? It doesn't give you an aspirational thing to move towards. Whereas fitness is something that you can see, you can visualize, you know when you're heading in that direction. So I always encourage people to write their goals, even if deep down it is an avoidance. Write it in terms of where you're heading. What do you want, not what you don't want. Exactly. What's your why? And so even the fitness thing, I would say, what is the why for that? Why is that important to you? Because I want to, keep up with my kids on the weekend. Okay, so it's about lifestyle and family. Make sure that's in there somehow. And that also reminds people, yeah, this is really important to me. So clarity, writing it down. Put it somewhere you will see it. We forget our goals all the time. Life gets busy, work gets busy, kids get busy. All of these things come at us and we completely lose track. So we lose the clarity. So stick it somewhere where you will see it. It becomes a visual reminder.
Eventually your energy and motivation for it goes down over time.
Completely, exactly, when you're not frequently reminded of it. So you put it on a post-it note, stick it somewhere. The next step I would say is, what's really valuable is to set up, it doesn't work for every single goal, but if you can set up a way where you can track it daily, where there is some kind of progress daily or something that you're doing daily, it doesn't have to be big. And you set up a visual tracker. So this is called the Seinfeld strategy. Jerry Seinfeld, we all know him as the comedian. When he was learning how to do stand-up, someone asked him, like, how do you get good at what you do? And he said, there's a strategy that I use. And it is that every night I will practice my jokes. Audience, no audience, doesn't matter. I will practice my jokes. And I have a big calendar that I've got on the wall. Every night when I practice a joke, I will put a big green tick on my calendar. And then over time, I see these ticks adding. Now, that does two things. Visually, you can see your progress, but also it sets up internally a desire not to break the chain. You want to keep that going. So it becomes this internal motivator because you're visually seeing it.
It's crazy how, sorry to interrupt you, but it's crazy how just sticking to the promises you make to yourself
Yes.
affects so much with your self-worth,
Completely.
your confidence.
Completely.
Because the last thing you want to ghost is yourself.
Oh, beautifully said. Beautifully said. And it goes back to what we were talking about in terms of identity. You need to prove to yourself that you're someone you can trust. Because if you don't commit to and then honor the promises you're making to yourself, then you're never going to have confidence in yourself, and you're never going to trust yourself, and then it's going to be so difficult to do anything that you're moving towards. James Clear says it beautifully. He says something like, every action that you take is a vote towards future you.
Yes.
The type of person you want to become.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is such a valuable reminder. Who is it that you want to become, and how do you take actions that are aligned to that?
Let's tag those votes in.
Exactly.
All right. Final question.
Final question. What's it going to be?
From your perspective, what is the high performance mindset?
Oh, I love this question. So, peak performance to a lot of people, when we ask them, like, what does that mean to you? They will imagine the top tier entrepreneur, the high powered CEO, the person who wakes up at 6 a.m. and crushes their goals. They've got these visuals, the Instagram influencer who's always on it. But in my view, which might be a little bit different to many, true peak performance is about showing up in your peak state no matter what you're doing and who you're with. Which means showing up as your best self in your business, showing up as your best self at home with your family, when you're helping your kids with their homework, when you're dealing with the barista at the coffee and he gives you your drink and it's the wrong type of milk, right? It's the ability to be your best self, to operate from your peak state, which is an elevated version of you in every single domain. And that will look a little bit differently depending on the domain. But that comes down to asking yourself the question, how can I be better today? How can I be a little bit more patient with my kids? How can I be a little bit more committed to this task? How can I be a little bit more understanding to this really challenging team member that is grinding my gears? That is peak performance. Showing up in your peak state, always looking to improve yourself in your relationships, in your work, in everything.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much for today. I'm sure the listeners would have enjoyed it as much as I did.
Thanks, Hisham. I hope everyone listening is able to get something valuable from this.